Hello and welcome to episode number 7 of the Why Carbs Won't Make You Fat podcast. Nick and Josh are here. Nick is still here, so we take it that Mrs. M is doing very well, but she isn't quite ready to deliver little
yet.
M yet.
M Junior.
M Junior. M Junior. Right, how are we doing, boys?
Good.
Good.
Glad it's Friday.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How about you, Tim?
Cold, I think, is the other one. Not about you boys up there, but it's been pretty frosty down in Woods.
Well, I work in an outdoor gym, so I feel it's like conditioning for me at the moment. It's nice in the sunshine and Baltic in the shade, but the things you do for gainful employment.
Mm-hmm. Apparently, is there a Scandi thing where I can't remember, they call it like some name. I can't remember what it is, but you basically, on cold days, you leave your bedroom window open all day long, and you cold box that room. So you leave the window open, you shut the door, and you like draft excluders on the outside to make that room as cold as possible. And then when you go to bed, obviously cold is linked to good sleep.
Yes,
it provides a great environment for you to nod off. I've not convinced the wife yet. I was trying to say, let's give it a go, but I've not quite won around just yet.
I think so. I don't know how factual this is because I'm pretty sure I saw it on Instagram. So let's take this with a truckload of salt. But I think they also do something similar to help babies sleep. They sort of like coddle them up.
They put loads of pram in the cold.
Yeah.
Sorry, Josh.
They go to cafes and leave their babies out in the cold in the pram as a weathering, hardening technique, boosting their immune system. And when they do it quite in Sweden quite a bit and other Scandinavian countries that I've heard of, and then they talk about it to more westernized societies and they think you're insane. But
I think like social services knocking on the door if that was
you would. But then I guess the history of Scandinavia is they all got in a little rowboat and rowed across the North Sea in search of something they didn't know was there, and then came and conquered it. So obviously something different in the gene pool there over there.
Yeah, and there's a little one of the Viking stories that was also put in the series of one of the most famous ones called Ragnar Lothbrok. He had many sons, one of whom was called Ivar the Boneless, who was paraplegic. And in the series, whether this happened in real life or not, in the Viking saga, Ragnar thought, you're not going to survive, so he just left him out in the woods one day. And whether Ivar made his way back or his mother took pity on him, that was it, and then brought him back, and then he ended up being one of the most brutal tacticians in the Viking history, basically. And they do a good job. It's probably over dramatized to a degree in the series that's on Amazon, but there's this particular scene where they've raided York, and Ivar goes around in a chariot, basically, and he gets knocked out of his chariot, but even without it, he's still very formidable and proceeds to kill a number of Englishmen. And then he pulls himself up in front of his destroyed chariot. His face is covered in blood, and he then gives this very blood-curdling speech about who he is, and you're not going to kill him, basically. And every now and then I watch it and go, oh,
shivers. I wonder if that's where they get the idea for the character Brandon Stark in Game of Thrones, actually. I mean, no spoilers. He isn't paraplegic in episode 1, but he is fairly soon afterwards. So I don't think and it's a very old series now, so I don't think I've ruined that for anyone. So have any of these things come up in your NCT classes, Nick?
No, funny enough, we learned how to swaddle a baby, which was a new one on me. But
wow,
yeah, there's no advice on leaving them outside or taking them across the North Sea.
Does that come after 6 months when you've reassessing your life choices? I
think so, yeah. But when I've had sleepless nights for 6 months, I'm like, perhaps I'll go across the North Sea and get a good night's sleep.
Maybe. Well, on that note, we wanted to talk a little bit about, because clearly Josh and I are not in a position to talk about it, but Nick, you're preparing for parenthood. So just interested to see what the current plan is around your own health, nutrition. Clearly that may well change. No plan survives first contact with the enemy and all that, but
yeah. So first, caveat this one with any parents listening who hear my plans and are there laughing to themselves going, you've not got a clue. Just caveat that I'm going into this from a position of hope and optimism instead of,
good.
So the way I kind of look at it is you have to kind of, and I always recommend this with people that do a lot of things. So if you're like doing a New Year's resolution or this kind of stuff, or something's just changing, I always sort of think about looking at your points of friction in terms of what is going to stop you from achieving your goals during these certain times, or when things change. And I think you can probably look at having a child, and there's sort of points of friction there in terms of lack of sleep and all this kind of thing. So I was kind of thinking about how that would impact me moving forward. And I think the first thing I always think of is you have to accept what's happening. I know that sounds a bit full on, but like you have to accept that things are changing.
Yeah.
Because as long as I try and cling on to what used to be and try and continue my routine, I'm just going to get stressed.
Yeah.
I'm going to get annoyed. I'm going to get frustrated. So you kind of have to accept that this is happening and it's going to change, and you just go with it, basically.
Yeah.
So when I looked at my points of friction, is like one of the main ones for me is I know that I still want to work out when baby comes along. But the point of friction to that is getting in a car and going to the gym.
Yeah.
Now, it's only a 10-minute car journey.
20-minute round trip.
It's not hard, don't get me wrong. But it's if I'm tired or baby's crying and, Harriet is got her hands full, it's going to be hard for me to go and get in the car and go. So with that, I made a decision just to get a few bits, put in the garage. So I don't know if you know, like the Bowflex style
adjustable dumbbells,
adjustable ones. So basically, they look like Bowflex. They're not Bowflex.
Yeah.
They're a random brand that
do the job.
That I found, but they're superb. They are absolutely amazing. Quality of them is really good. And it doesn't have to be anyone listening to this thinking, well, they're clearly a lot of money. They weren't that expensive. And I found them on Marketplace, so Facebook Marketplace. There was a guy not far away from here selling them, easy. And even if you just buy some stuff from Argos, do you know what I mean? Like some basic kind of weights that you can just do some mobility stuff, or failing that, you can do a YouTube body weight workout in the garage. And before anyone sort of thinks that I've got, a double garage that I can fit everything in, I haven't. I'm doing press ups next to the barbecue, moving the lawnmower out of the way, and trying to find whatever space I can just to do it. But I know that will help me moving forward. So that's one of the things I sort of try to do. The other one is obviously, and the one I think a lot of people talk about, is trying to stick to some sort of nutritional plan when you're focusing on a baby is quite hard. So one of the things we've been looking at there to try and make things easier is batch cooking. So at the moment, we're just trying to batch cook as much as we can. And then you kind of batch it up and put it in the freezer. I think I said before, there's always that saying of like, you cook once, eat twice. You just try
last time around.
Bulk up meals. So sort of things we're looking at is, you can stick some beef mince in a slow cooker and make a massive batch of it. Portion it up into bags. And then when you're tired, you can just have that bag out the freezer, obviously defrost it, whatever, bit of pasta, bit of rice, a couple of veg. It'll take no time at all.
10-minute meal,
Exactly. Failing that, if we really are tired, I have no shame in saying that I'll go to Aldi or Tesco and get a ready meal, but one of the more kind of, let's have a look at one that's got a bit of protein in it. And there are some fantastic options out there now in terms
I agree.
of what supermarkets are doing. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think that's where some people could maybe struggle with, I shouldn't be going for ready meals. Do it. It's not it's not the rest of your life.
Yeah,
Just
meet
help you
yourself
out
where you're at.
where you are. And in terms of the slow cooker, we bought a new recipe book the other day. It's called Board of Lunch by Nathan Anthony.
Okay.
It's very good. He's got 2 slow cooker ones. He's got an air fryer one.
Oh,
And what I quite like about it is it's got a whole range of meals, but his instructions on the menu on the recipe thing is basically, number 1, take these ingredients. Number 2, put them in the slow cooker, set it to medium, come back in 6 hours.
I love that.
And it's the most simple kind of food you can imagine. So I think we'll be using that quite a lot. And then the final one in terms of like food, as well as the ready meals, there's no shame in just having beans on toast.
No.
An emergency meal of mine, beans on toast, bit of cheese. I actually do 2 fried eggs on top. Now you can, if you have a good quality pan, you can do a dry fried egg, which is basically a little bit of oil is smeared on, not a lot. Put the egg in, cover it with something like a baking tray or a lid or whatever to get the overall cook. And if you've got a good non-stick pan, it'll just slip right out. 2 of those. So you've got beans on toast. You've got carbs in the bread and the beans, protein, fats in the eggs and the cheese. It's such a basic meal, but it's underrated, and that'll probably help us out in the first few weeks.
So underrated
to get through. Yeah. And then obviously just asking friends and family for help in terms of food. So we kind of it sounds wrong, but like we're going to kind of have a rule where if family or friends come round, it's like you can come round, but bring some food. Bring something that can just contribute to the fridge or whatever. And we've done that for friends before. We've cooked curries for friends and this kind of stuff. So it's a kind of nice, just goes around in a circle. So that's how I'm just going to try and keep the nutrition and the exercise going. I think having a baby kind of opens up a new world in terms of exercise. So I'm quite looking forward to going around the park with like a little baby vest thing on.
Yeah.
I saw Daniel Craig do it once, and I thought, well, if it's good enough for James Bond, I can do it. So, and then obviously, like, as he grows, he just gets heavier. So it's just like a incremental weight every couple of weeks.
Just go rocking with your son.
Indeed, that's what.
Didn't Piers Morgan then try and be Piers Morgan about that and be like, "Isn't Daniel Craig so weak?" And Daniel Craig was like, "No, I'm carrying my son around, thanks."
I'm quite looking forward to that, to be honest. So I think it's like looking at different opportunities to exercise, just more walks and stuff like that. But the one thing I found surprising so far, in terms of having a baby, it's not more necessarily on me. It's how little focus there is on nutrition for mums. So and again, I'm going to put a disclaimer in here. I fully get that the number one job is to raise a baby, grow a baby in the womb and give birth and that kind of stuff. But we had an NCT last week, an NCT class, and it was about providing snacks during labour. And all the recommendations were, sports drinks, jelly babies, chocolates, all this kind of stuff. And I get it. You have to have foods that you're comfortable with and you're familiar with and make you feel good because you're going through a lot. But I was just surprised that there's no sort of, I don't know, maybe this is my nutrition head on a bit too much. Just a bit more of a labour can be quite a long time. So if you're having high sugar snacks at the start, what goes up is going to come down. And how can we manage that if a labour is, the 24, 48 hours? And then even like after the birth, there's no kind of advice in terms of, try and include a bit of protein. Your body's just gone through one of the most overwhelming experiences you'll probably ever go through as a person. Your body is changed completely and healing after a labour.
A lot of trauma.
I think, a lot of trauma. I put my hand up in the NCT class and I just said, first priority is look after your child and just eat what you can when you can. But if there's potentially a chance to focus on including some veg in there, some colourful foods and some protein, it's just going to give your body what you need and maybe help you just not, recover overnight, but just feel a bit better. And the look I got from the NCT instructor was like I just said, I want to piss on your feet at Christmas. It was so like, okay, because she went, oh, well, there's nothing wrong with having chocolate.
Well, no, there isn't.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
No. Yeah.
I'm just saying, if you want to have a beige diet, feel free to go and eat what you want. I'm just saying, having some nutritious foods in there might just help you along with the recovery. But I do appreciate that as a guy, it's a bit of a minefield in terms of recommending,
100%. But actually, when we all learned nutrition, the lady who delivered it was a mum, and her advice was very similar to yours in terms of obviously eat what you feel able to, like at any point through through labor into childbirth, but if you nourish yourself, everything's going to be better, and that baby's still reliant on you for food. And as we said last week, you'll be less tired if you can include those things. Obviously life is very, very difficult for mum, so be very flexible with that, but if she fancies some fruit and veg, don't necessarily hand her the chocolate bar, I think, is the message.
Yeah, exactly. So I think I'm going to try and kind of prepare as much kind of nutritious stuff as I can, even if it's just a case of, buy a melon and chop it up just in the fridge, ready for Harriet to grab as and when she wants it, or chop up some peppers. Yeah, it's quite nice to eat if you just want something cold and crunchy and that kind of stuff. So I'll try and do that. But yeah, I think that's kind of where we are at the moment. I think that's the plan. As I said, is it Mike Tyson said, everyone's got a plan until you get punched in the face?
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of where I am. That's where I am at the moment.
You're waiting for that punch in the face. Very good.
The bell's gone. I'm running out in the ring. I'm about to get punched. So we'll see what happens.
Cool. I think that would be a really nice one to come back to in 6 months' time and see how it's going. So, you can give us the benefit of your experience at that point and how you rolled with the punches. I love the bit about finding spotting those points of friction now and trying to have a plan for them. Really like that. Cool. Okay. Right. We're going to go straight into it with Josh now. So, Josh, what is pissing you off on Instagram?
Have we got long enough?
Have we got long enough?
Well, there was so Chris Williamson on Modern Wisdom. He likes this term of memification of things. So he comes up with particular words or phrases. And so what I sent on the chat today was, charlatan sensationalism.
Yes, that was it.
Which is really hard to say fast. But so many platforms out there, whether it's Instagram, YouTube, or a variety of other podcasts and things like that. Like Stephen Bartlett's a real culprit for this with Diary C, because he has so many biohackers, some nutritionists, some endocrinologists, other types of scientists, and all that sort of stuff, all on the same show. And they're saying rather very polarizing things every time they're on. And seeing as it has such a big audience, for the average person listening or watching, makes it almost impossible for them to make any kind of headway. And every now and then, there are little pearls in there. Yeah. Which can be applied for. Like one of the bigger, it's hardly a controversy because it was so obvious, but last year was the Liver King scandal. So for those listening who don't know who he is, you've done a very good job not knowing who he is. So his name is Brian Johnson. Now, there is another Brian Johnson who's also trying to hack his way to living to over 100, and he looks like a shaved alien. with it's the only way I can describe him, because he's kind of got this ethereal look about him, which almost doesn't seem human. But Brian Johnson, Liver King, initially, when his story got exposed by a guy called Zach Talander, who's a YouTube content creator, weightlifting coach, very good. And he's a musician as well, which is cool. It's me being a musician partly too.
Right up your street. Yeah.
Why I like him too. But him in collaboration with a guy called Derek from All Plates, All Dates, who basically does like natty or not videos on people in the fitness industry, did this hour-long documentary about Brian Johnson, the Liver King, exposing the fact that he was spending $10,000 to $15,000 on PEDs to look a certain way, and was talking to his drug coach basically to say, I want to get as big as possible, get as famous as possible, because beforehand he was just, it seemed like I'd say more so than a weekend warrior sort of CrossFit amateur athlete or something like that. And his main shtick with getting into the supplement space was selling desiccated organs supplements, like liver and pancreas and all that sort of thing. And then to make friends with the algorithm these days, you have to either be polarizing or posting something shocking. And so posting himself being all jacked, tanned, and eating raw testicles was the way of doing it, basically. And he's like one end of the scale. And then you've got younger people who are probably in their late teens, early 20s or something like that, who may, whether they're in England or in America, they might have just done a PE GCSE or something like that and think, I want to be a content creator. And they'll say, don't deadlift. Deadlift's really bad for you. Or why are you squatting arse to grass? That's really bad for you. So they'll pick any kind of subject that's been around for donkey's years and try and fearmonger people into possibly buying their program, which, given their age and maybe their experience, it's probably me casting aspersions to their level of expertise, because they might be a freak of nature and they might have been an athlete from an early age and learned a lot and converted that to a side hustle when they're at school and then college, and then they go full bore into it in their late teens, early 20s. But for the most part, it's probably just someone with a loud voice, a Rode clip microphone, and a good quality iPhone, and they just start filming themselves in a pure gym. But it's just the saturation of that online is the real tricky bit. There was one other podcast I like to listen to called Heretics, which is a guy called Andrew Gold, who used to be a BBC documentary filmmaker, and then he moved on to doing these kind of interviews on YouTube, and he was talking to a psychologist. I probably brought it up on another podcast that we did. Lost my train of thought. Damn it. It kind of went into like the whole Black Mirror episodes, of seeing as we have all these things, Black Mirrors, and just start staring at ourselves. And this could kind of get into the mindset or psychological side of codependency, of wanting to be seen a certain way and have some sort of worth, whatever that may be, and some kind of purpose. And I don't knock people for wanting to try and do that, because that's partly what we're doing with this podcast as well, but hopefully coming from a more genuine angle without really having something gimmicky to sell, basically. So kind of going back to the Diary of a CEO chat, like they had Gary Brecker on recently, and his big thing is getting people to do these 72-hour or 84-hour fasts or whatever it is. And his biggest client was Dana White, the UFC founder.
Oh yeah, I know.
And arguably before he did it, he was not in good shape, and probably on the way to an early grave, basically. And incredibly successful businessman, but not paying any attention whatsoever to his health because he was so focused on that one thing. And then as soon as he started taking care of his health, even though it was in an extreme way, he started to feel better. And it's much like when people say if they go from an ultra processed food way of eating to then starting to eat nutrient dense foods, then they feel the benefit of it pretty much instantly, or maybe within 1 or 2 weeks. Yeah. And it's just that little bit of investment that is incredibly valuable to take away from that initial onset. But then the other product that gets sold is the thing that is a bit snake oil to me.
Yeah. So I think going all the way back to Liver King and the whole, he was on a boatload of performance enhancing and image enhancing drugs. The thing that's he claimed throughout that he wasn't vehemently a lot, and he's like, no, it's because I eat primarily, so I just eat meat and animal organs, and that's what makes me jacked. By the way, if that's difficult to do, here are all these supplements. Then you look on the website, the supplements are ridiculously expensive, but they're basically the sweepings off the butcher's floor. So he's paying nothing for them, packaging them up. And sure, the bloke's got a living to make, fine. But he knew what he was doing, was conning a lot of people who didn't know what they were doing. And that's not cool. Like, it's not illegal to take image and performance enhancing drugs. It's illegal to sell them to people, I think. But it comes down to personal choice, and loads of people use them.
And morals as well, because if you're marketing yourself in a particular way, but you're
100%,
being disingenuous about it and lying to people saying, you can look like me, like, that's the real issue.
That is, that's the immoral bit of it. It's like, you can look like me, but not mention the fact that you look like that because you're spending however many thousands a month on your doctor's bill, shall we say.
I think it was interesting what you were saying about Diary of a CEO, the direction that he's now gone in. Like, his podcast used to be superb. There's two that I remember, and one was with Jimmy Carr.
Yeah, that was a really good one.
I think I've listened to that one about 4 or 5 times since. It was so good. And then there was one, Mo someone, can't remember what his name was. I'll have to share it because it was a really good one. It was basically a guy called Mo, I think, and his son died, and it changed his perspective in life.
Right.
And it wasn't about suffering; it was kind of trying to see the positive, and it was quite an uplifting talk.
Yeah.
But so back in that day, it was so good to hear that kind of conversation on a regular basis, and it's almost like something switched, and he started to go, "Oh, hang on. If I do these sensationalism podcasts and I put out some clickbait that, eating a cow's testicle will get you a 6-pack in 10 days. It gets a lot of clicks, and I'm getting a lot of attention. And I sit there sometimes and I hear him on these podcasts, and then I think, you're not a stupid person. You are where you are. You're an intelligent man, but you're sitting there going, oh, so you're telling me that, eating this way gets me a 6-pack in no time at all. And I was like, come on. You know what he's doing.
It's like when he did the whole thing with Tim Spector, and then he's like using the Zoe app and everything, and then he's talking about how his health, and I'm sure some of the stuff they would have got him to do would have improved his health. But I'm just like, you're being paid to fucking say this.
In some way. The thing that I enjoyed, he did a podcast once where I think it was the Tim Spector one, and they were talking about how, you should move away from processed foods and don't have put all the processed foods out of your kitchen. But then obviously he cuts to an advert break, and it's his advert on Huel. And you're like, mate, if you're going to do it, at least, do it properly. So I still like some of his stuff because I think he is a good podcaster, but I'm taking a lot of what he's saying and his guests are saying with a pinch of salt. I think you can use it as a starting point, as an investigation, hear it and go, that sounds interesting, but I'm not quite going to believe it yet, and go away and do your own kind of research on it.
So I used this analogy in a post that I've scheduled to come out on my Instagram on Monday, but you'll have to read the caption. But so I didn't talk about critical thinking, but I'm kind of trying to guide the audience towards critical thinking. And I said, and at the end, I was talking about food labeling and being like, the front of the packet is advertising, the back of the packet is actually very educational because it's factual and controlled and it is data that is checked by someone. The front of the packet, they can say whatever the fuck they like to sell it. That's the job of the front. Back is information. So I was like, we'll treat the front of the packet like a Daily Mail headline.
Yeah.
It might be right, but its primary purpose is to sell you something, as is the Daily Mail headline. And some of the journalism in the article might be good, might not be good. But whatever they're saying in there is pretty much somebody's opinion, not necessarily a fact. So having that kind of anything that you see anywhere, doesn't have to be online, like books, there's bullshit in loads of books as well out there. Just think, is that too good to be true? Or that doesn't sound like the advice has been for the last 400 years, maybe.
But this goes back to Liver King, doesn't it? It's like, I think we all saw him and went, Jesus, he's jacked. And my first thought was, he's on steroids. He's got to be. Then the more I saw it, even I was like, perhaps there's something in this. Perhaps it is liver.
You
start to see so much of it that you go, well, perhaps he's right. And then obviously you go, well, no, I was right anyway. He's just a jacked up steroid guy.
There was actually talking about positive. Like, let's finish the bit on Instagram and social media and podcasts on a positive bit. On Instagram today, I reshared it to my stories, but there's Carbon Diet Coach, which is Dr. Lane Norton's diet program app. They put out a post, and it was all about Chris Hemsworth and Thor, and I've got it on my screen here. Movie star bodies, are they sustainable? So there's a little clip of Thor at the start where he's looking ripped. Everyone craves that physique, and it's like, right, this is what he actually does to do that, or according to him, and like stuff that they've talked about. But right, Chris Hemsworth eats 4,000 calories a day. Oh, woohoo, that's amazing. But hang on, that's actually, I do that because I'm really active, and it's a lot of fucking food. I promise you, it's hard. And they're like, that's 6.7 Big Macs every day. Again, that sounds amazing as a one-off, but promise you, if you did that literally every day, you would feel like death. And what he does is then he breaks it down he eats 8 times per day. So he's eating a small amount. And that is because, from personal experience, because it's so hard to eat beyond your fullness, you're going to need to eat more times. That's not a very good strategy if you just want to maintain whatever. But he's like doing all this stuff, and it talks in the article about like he feels like he's bored of eating all the time. I can kind of get on board with that. That's how I feel a lot of the time. Now, lots of Hollywood movie stars, and I'm not saying Hemsworth is this one, but he's massive. Like they're paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to do that and make that transformation. You look at like Hugh Jackman and Wolverine, like it's lots of very difficult stuff they go through to take that shirtless photo where they just dehydrate themselves for an entire day. And a lot of them, whether they say it or not, like the guy in the Amazon series Reacher, podcast with him, like he talks about in the podcast a lot about his mental health and stuff, and he went on TRT. But, a lot of people said, oh, well, that's how you got so jacked in the next episode. And it is. But part of that TRT was partly what he says is like health related. But either way, like if you are being paid hundreds of thousands of pounds to do a movie and you have to look a certain way for the producer, like you're going to use all of the aids available to you. You're going to have your own personal trainer. You're going to eat the right foods. You might even take some performance and image enhancing drugs to get you there and make you look massive. It happens in loads of sport, probably happens in loads of influencers are slamming the drugs to look a certain way because they're selling things based on how they look. So, huge grain of salt.
I find the interesting thing with when people say about like taking steroids and stuff, I've never done it. I've never been interested in it. But there seems to be this assumption that, you've cheated because you've taken steroids. And people tend to think that, you just take a few injections for a few weeks, and all of a sudden you become this jacked kind of, hench bodybuilder. It's like, it doesn't just, you've still got to put the work in.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You've still got to go and do the work. It's just giving you a bit of a leg up with doing the work. It can be a sort of, well, people say it's a bit of cheating. It's like, yeah, I see what you're saying, but like, that person still put the work in. So
again, like something that we studied in our BTN course, but that we had a guy who was an expert in it, and to do it properly, you go get a doctor, you have blood tests so that you're doing it safely. But he made the point crystal clear at the start of the lecture. He was like, if you're not eating well and training properly, it's a waste of time.
Yeah.
You're get all that right first, and then, like, I've heard it described as described as a trump card to play. So I've done all the right stuff, I've got this to achieve, trump card. So it might be movie star, right? I've been working really hard. I need to be bigger than I am naturally. Trump card, bang, play it. Be safe, be sensible about it. Might be, an athlete where it's a sport where it's permitted under the competition regulations. That doesn't mean that other athletes who aren't permitted to use it in their competition regulations don't use it. But again, like an old school video game, where, like, racing car game, where you had like the nitro boost, lasts for a little while, gives you that little bit of extra oomph to go and like beat your mate in Mario Kart or whatever. But that's it's that kind of thing. It's not something that is suddenly going to inspire you to go and train in the gym 5 days a week if you only go train twice a week.
Yeah, agree with that. Not an advert for steroids, though, just to put one out there. Not encouraged.
No, I mean, not for me. I know people use them. I know people, it's personal choice.
Yeah.
Right. On that note, I quite fancy continuing I won't just bash Tim Spector, but this is I see a lot of adverts for his program at the moment. I've gone to the strategy. I actually heard from someone else. So, like, well, basically, he's paying for all those adverts that you don't want to see, and it's pay per click.
Yeah.
So I've now started clicking on all of them. So he's basically paying for me to click on it, and I'm never going to sign up to his program. Taking him down 20 pence at a time.
How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, one of the things I want to talk about, this isn't just him. They are seemingly back end of last year. They were sort of everywhere. Continuous glucose monitors for the purpose of dieting if you have a healthy metabolism. So you're not living with a form of diabetes or pre-diabetic. The take-home point is essentially monitoring your blood glucose is not going to help you or hinder you from losing weight. It might slightly alter your eating behaviors and bring up your awareness of food. But there is a huge misconception that if your insulin spikes, that leads to fat storage. Now, the job of insulin is to take all of the nutrients from your food, proteins, carbs, and fats, and stick them somewhere helpful in your body. So it is true to say that when your insulin spikes, you might store fat, but that's only temporary storage, because why do we store body fat? We store body fat to give our body access to fuel when we haven't eaten for a while, which is why a bear eats all of the fish in the summer before they hibernate, gets a little bit tubby and goes and hibernates and doesn't eat for 6 months. That's how that works. Obviously, we're not bears, but we have that aspect of our metabolism. So that's what body fat is there for. It's an energy store that can be drawn down on. So if insulin rises, causes you to store body fat, but that's only temporary if your calorie balance is correct for your goal. So if you're in a calorie deficit, regardless of what your insulin does, you won't store body fat. I've been challenged on this by someone who was allegedly a professional on Instagram, who was like, oh, if your insulin levels are chronically elevated, you'll never be able to lose body fat, which I still say is bullshit to this day, because it's known from research that even if you are living with diabetes and your insulin level is chronically elevated, a calorie deficit does still work. Yeah.
Just
so
to add to that,
yes, Nick,
have you seen the latest? What was it they called it? Ozempic, the weight loss drug.
Yeah, GLP-1 agonist.
Yeah. So if you, I'm not a doctor, so I'm going to butcher the hell out of it. But so Ozempic is a class of drug that you said is a GLP.
Yeah, GLP-1 agonists, I believe, is what they're called. Yeah.
I did see what GLP stood for, but I've forgotten. So that works in a way that it actually promotes insulin in the body to help regulate blood sugar. So it's actually increasing insulin in the body. So when you look at people that are saying that insulin is the cause of weight gain or you can't lose weight, and I'm pointing this more at someone that's called the glucose goddess.
Right. Okay.
Oh yeah.
She can get on my list as well. Okay.
Yeah. Check her website out. She says that insulin is the cause of weight gain and that's the cause of your troubles and all this kind of stuff.
Shit.
But that kind of seems to go against how Ozempic works, because one of its main factors there is promoting the release of insulin.
Yeah.
It was like, well, again, I'm not a doctor, but for me, that's enough for me to question it.
So and actually,
you need to look further into that and say, well, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah. So what happens if you are living with diabetes is your body isn't able to produce the right amount of insulin to match the food that's gone in.
Yeah.
So like back in the day, you would have had to use pen and paper with a little book and a notepad. Be like, right, I had 300 grams of potato. That's so many carbohydrate. Do a little back of the fag packet calculation, and this is how much insulin I need to take if you were a type 1 diabetic. These days, you can have a continuous glucose monitor fitted, which is monitoring your glucose continuously. You can stick the food that you eat in a calorie tracking app, and then you can administer the correct amount of insulin, and then you've got a bit of feedback from your monitor. Now, what I didn't realize, so there's a couple of sources that I've kind of listened to a lot. So there's one on the Ozempic thing, which I'll come back to. Jordan Syatt, online fitness coach, who's actually in Alan Aragon's research review of the week, which I'm trying to find on my screen here somewhere. But he did for an entire month, fitted a CGM and deliberately spiked his blood sugar every single morning whilst he was in a calorie deficit. And like one morning he'd wake up and be like, I'm going to have this many gummy worms for breakfast. That's my breakfast. Another morning he was like literally eating table sugar. His content's quality. Like he works the system very well because he's a legitimate coach, but he does like the shocking things and then but educates around it. Did all this stuff, lost a load of weight because he's got a healthy metabolism, calorie balance is fine for him. One of the things that his audience then like fed back to him, so a lot of people who live with diabetes are like, actually, the CGM is just estimating based on, it's either like hydration status or something. It's not a blood measurement. So what someone who has type 1 diabetes would do is they'd use their CGM as continuous data, but throughout the day, they'd still take a blood prick from their finger and do a more accurate test just to kind of even it out. The other thing from his experiment, which isn't in the, I should find the research video on my screen, but a bunch of other stuff spikes your insulin, including stuff like training fasted, exercise, all stuff that we know is good for us. In fact, and a bunch of other stuff that isn't so good for us, like alcohol affects your insulin levels as well. So if you were to stick this thing in your arm to monitor your insulin, be like, well, a spike is bad because I've eaten this thing, doesn't really work like that. And then you end up with a bunch of food phobia because healthful foods spike it, eating protein spikes it, and there's all stuff that is known to be good for us. So it doesn't really tell you what you want it to, unfortunately.
I'd agree with that. And I think it's, say I go to the shops tomorrow and I buy one of those monitors and I wear it and I start eating and I start noticing certain foods are spiking it certain foods not so much. Firstly, if you're just an average person, do you know what the numbers on those monitors are telling you? And do you know what to do with it? That's the first concern I'd have. And then all you're really going to see is that simple carbs or, sweet foods are going to spike it more than others. So what you're potentially going to do is just move away from those type of foods to a more, complex carb style, because you notice that probably spikes it less, or vegetables and this kind of thing. So you're just going to move towards a more nutritious diet, which is what people are telling you anyway.
Yeah, you don't need
without having a monitor.
Yeah.
But I think the one thing that I noticed on Glucose Goddess's website, she gets into a lot of talk about you need to eat food in a certain way. Now, this is like eating disorder issues.
Yeah, this is
the alarm bells are ringing now when you start telling this advice. So she said, if you're going to have a sandwich, you need to take it. I think it was a burger. You need to take the burger apart, and I think she was saying like you eat the veg first, then the protein, and then you move on to like carbs and fats. Now, to an average person, that probably goes, "Oh, no, that makes sense." Yeah, because she says apparently like it provides a mesh in your stomach, and it helps slow down the release of. I can see, for people who can't see this podcast, I've just seen Tim nearly kick his desk in anger, which is quite amusing. So she said it forms a mesh and slows down the rate it's absorbed. Now, I might be a bit cynical, but what I'm going to say is if you adopt the approach of looking at meals as eating veg first, then your protein, chances are when you get to the carbs and fats, you might feel a little bit full up,
exactly,
or satisfied, and you might go, "Oh, do you know what? Actually, that cheese I was going to put on there, don't really want all of that."
Yep.
It's not. I look at it and I go, "You're just encouraging people to eat the nutritious bits first."
Yep.
It's like one of her tips is if you go out for a restaurant, have a green-based starter. So have something like a salad as a starter, because that will provide your stomach with the mesh. No, it's just filling your stomach with something that's fairly low calorie, meaning you probably won't eat as much as your main meal, and therefore you'll consume less calories.
Exactly, because
I'm a cynic. So
and the facts around that are, it's great advice to do that if you want to manage your appetite, because your stomach has got a stretch reflex. Imagine on Christmas Day when you literally can't eat anything else. That's because your stomach has expanded, the nerves in your body have gone, there's no more room, stop. That's how that works. It's nothing to do with your insulin.
Yeah. One of our other top tips is before meals, consume a glass of apple cider vinegar mixed with
whole
water.
Glass?
No, so it's diluted in water.
Diluted.
I haven't seen how much she says, but apple cider vinegar in water. Now, there's two things that are going to happen here. If I nail a glass of vinegar before a meal, I imagine it's a bit like having some mouthwash before I go and have dinner.
Yeah,
it's going to put you off eating, because it's going to put that taste in your mouth, and you're going to go, "Oh, I'm not hungry anymore." And if that doesn't get you, I imagine that nailing a glass of water before you have a meal is going to have an impact on how much you eat.
Yeah,
just putting it out there.
Yeah,
so,
and it can be an okay strategy to do that. So where I like to a degree is you can make yourself a simple little rule of each time I sit down to eat, I'll have some water ahead of my dinner. But you got to be careful with that, because if you were to end up in any like groups of people with eating disorders, one thing that they do is scull shitloads of water before they eat to make their stomach really full, so they basically don't feel hungry. So
I think the plain water is fine. I think when you start adding vinegar into it because you think this is going to stop a blood sugar spike.
Yeah.
And like one of the graphs she likes to do on her website, she has all these different graphs which show I ate this and this caused my blood sugar to do this.
Yeah.
But actually, if you do this, it flattens the curve, kind of thing. And I think she had, I think it was like a bowl of porridge, and it showed, obviously, it spiked quite high, and then tailed off. And then she compared that to a bowl of porridge with a glass of apple cider vinegar and 2 eggs. So my mind straight away goes, well, hang on, because we're no longer comparing apples and apples here. We're now comparing apples plus a pear.
Eggs.
Do you know what I mean? You're changing the boundaries. So I would argue, let's do a test where you just have porridge or porridge and apple cider vinegar, and there might be a slight difference, but I'd bet 50p on it not being that much of a difference.
Yeah,
it's just that the proteins cause it to level off.
Yeah, and the best way of balancing your the best way of slowing your digestion and keeping those spikes relatively level is to eat a balanced meal containing vegetables, proteins, carbohydrates, and fiber with a little bit of fat. That will slow everything down. Doesn't need to be any more complicated for that for literally anybody. If you want to dig into a bit more, I have an article on my website, foodflexibility.co.uk, about CGMs, where I go into a bit more of the detail, a bit more of the science, so you can make up your own mind.
But it's the latest. It goes back to what we were saying about Liver King and Stephen Bartlett and those kind of. This is someone who's found an angle of the market that is another way of moving people towards thinking about more nutritious foods without mentioning calories, without mentioning, eating more nutritiously. It's use this device to get a score that will move you towards a more nutritious diet, because foods that spike less will probably be more nutritious. So it's just someone who's found
not
an
always.
angle. No, but it's just it's someone that's pushed someone in a direction towards thinking about more. If you've got someone that's doing this test and they're having a bowl of Frosties for their breakfast,
of course,
and it spikes horrifically, and then they do the next day where they have wholemeal toast and some poached eggs, and it's not the same spike, they'll go, oh, that's amazing, and they'll carry on eating that. Well, that's the kind of advice I'd be giving without making you do a monitor.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
and the other thing with the monitoring is people actually need them to stay alive. Type 1 diabetes is fatal if not treated. And the more people buy up the stocks of CGMs and flog them to people, the harder you're making those people who need them's lives, so they can't get hold of them, and you're driving up the price. Which isn't cool, I think. So on that front, I think I'll leave my rantiness and eye rolling there. So let's wrap it there. Let's do a few take home points each. So for me, I'll do mine first. My take home from the pod is, and I might start using this with some of my clients as well, whatever your goal is, whatever changes are ahead of you, forward planning. I love Nick's point about identify the points of friction, work out what you can do about them. So Nick talked about he's gone and got himself some adjustable dumbbells, which are an incredible addition to a garage gym. They take up no space. Really good idea. He's got himself a bunch of recipes for his slow cooker, and he's not going to be afraid to use some ready meals because he's going to look at what's in them, make a sensible decision around that. I think that was fantastic.
Thanks, mate.
No worries.
I'll go next if you want. I think the one I'll take was just highlighted by Josh, and I think it's just a case of encouraging people that if you see something on social media that you question, go and have a look into it. Go and have a look on, certain research, PubMed. If you can just, certain topics, you can do Google PubMed and then what you're looking for in terms of the topic, and it'll bring you up some papers. Or if in doubt, if you hear something and you go, I'm not sure about that, feel free to give myself a message or any of the other guys. I'm sure we'll be happy to help.
I'd add to that as well. Just stick in your search engine NHS and the thing.
Yeah,
it's going to be legitimate advice.
Yeah,
clearly presented, really underrated resource.
Well, my take home. Well, it was more what Nick was talking about with relation to the NCT classes and talking about nutrition, particularly for the mother. Although it was a different circumstance, but in 2017, my dad had cancer. He's all fine now, but when he was going through surgeries and then eventually a couple of rounds of chemo as well, there was some talk about nutrition, but not a whole lot. And what he then relayed to me, and this was before I had an interest in it, but I wasn't qualified or anything like that. And the general thing was, oh, eat what you like. You can have cakes, biscuits, just eat normal foods. You'll be fine. And so there wasn't really any more delving into specifics of, well, not even having to explain too deeply what a macronutrient is, but consider incorporating some of these things that are rich in these nutrients, and then you would hopefully feel better. But it's just a kind of a good job that for the last decade or whatever, I've had an interest in fitness and nutrition, and so been cooking from scratch, and so could see him right in that regard. But that's definitely something that needs more of a push, and not getting a bitchy look from the NCT leader saying, "What are you doing here? You're a man. Don't tell."
I think one, just to wrap on that, one of the problems with nutrition is everybody has to eat, and it becomes a very, very passionate subject.
Yes.
And like you have to be in a place where you're wanting nutrition advice, as if you're open to it. You're gonna,
or just any advice in general, because like you've probably had things with friends or family where you've suggested something and it's gone in one ear and out the other, and the circumstances haven't been right for them to take it, but then eventually something might happen, and then they'll go, I might take on what Nick or Tim said.
Good. Okay, Nick, where can people find you online?
I am at on Instagram, Metcalf_nutrition. And let's celebrate the fact that I hit 602 followers.
Yes.
So for those of you who have been listening or not seeing, Tim has been doing a very good job of cheerleading my Instagram account this week. And we finally got to the magic 600 number. So
nice.
Now we move to 700.
Now we move to 700. And while we build to 700, we're going to have a quick look on Josh's Instagram and see where he's at, and get him to get into the next milestone. So Josh, where can people find you if they want to give you a follow?
Josh at Josh Weebout 90. I'm how many followers? 952. So
big.
So big 1,000.
1,000 would be nice. Yeah.
Actually, like, get me to 1,000 as well. No, I'm gonna.
Josh is doing okay. He's fine.
Josh is doing all right. Okay, I might leave. Okay, well, if you want to get me to 1,000 followers, you can find me at Food Flexibility on Instagram and Facebook. I've also got a website, foodflexibility.co.uk. That's where a load of the context and stuff can be found. Useful articles, useful guides, all that kind of stuff. We'll wrap it there. Episode 7 done and dusted. We are going to get to 10, and then we're going to build onwards and upwards from there. Hopefully Nick's with us next week, but if he's not, it will be for a very good reason. And until then, remember, carbs won't make you fat.